back. And we have a guest, Mom.
We do have a guest. We have Rob Rosen here, right? Rosen?
Rosen, yes.
Okay, cool. Sorry.
We had a moment of like, is that right?
Yeah. Some people say Rosen or Rosen, but nope, Rosen, you got it right.
Cool. Okay.
Cool. Love that.
Talk went up.
Okay, so Rob is an award-winning investigative journalist, producer, and director with more than 30 years of experience in news and television. He showran an investigative series that's called Reasonable Doubt, which is currently streaming on Max. And then he also ran the infomercials that sold us, which starred Dennis Miller, which is streaming on Fox Nation. And he's the showrunner and executive producer of The Dead Files. That's one I've seen a lot of times.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yes.
We came out to your neck of the woods quite a few times for cases.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did a few of them in Denver.
Okay, that's interesting. I haven't seen every episode, not gonna lie to you, but I've seen a lot of them.
There are like 225, so I would be worried if you'd seen them all.
What else is this girl doing with her life?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So what was the one specific case in your career that made you decide, okay, I'm going to start investigating the justice system. We're gonna, start researching true crime journalism fails. What was that case? What did that look like?
I don't know if I can give you one specific case, but I can tell you that when I was doing Reasonable Doubt, there were quite a few cases, not the majority, but quite a few cases where someone was convicted of a murder. They had been in prison for, in some cases, decades. And when you really looked at the case and you really looked at the evidence, it was so flimsy. There was just so little there, and it was so flawed. And so, you really started to see that the system does work right most of the time, but when it doesn't, it really doesn't. And I think that, we did 50 cases. I would say in the majority of the time, we did find ultimately that the convict was rightfully convicted. But we got behind certain cases, and 9 of the people that we profiled and we did episodes on ended up getting released.
Wow.
That's so good.
That is cool. That is cool.
That's impactful.
Yeah, we've talked about that on a couple of our cases, that detectives will just get tunnel vision and they won't look outside the box because they're like, this is what it is and that's what it is and that's it. And whether they want to close cases or they just don't have the resources or whatever the case might be, or they have an agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be all of those things. I also think, sometimes in big cities, there's a real huge pressure to close cases and to get conviction rates up, so that the attorney general who's going to run for office or the mayor is able to point to it and say, look at the success that we've had. So I think a lot of the ones that we found where there were a lot of wrongful convictions was sort of getting to the mid to late 90s, where you had the crack epidemic and the public was clamoring for convictions. Mm-hmm. And you started seeing these police forces were overwhelmed, and they started just doing some sloppy casework, I think.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Totally. Well, and we talked about that too in one of ours, that they conviction rate and about the politics behind it. And so that was kind of sad and kind of frustrating, because that particular case, the person was innocent and they ended up getting put to death before it came out that they weren't guilty. So,
yeah. And then they found the real perp years later.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's hard to make it up to that family then.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, of the wrongfully convicted. At least, you can take away someone's time, but at least if they're still in prison, they can enjoy some of their time left. Right. We had a case with a guy, Glenn Simmons. It was in a place called, I think it was called Cordell, Oklahoma. It was an hour north of Oklahoma City, if I remember right. And he had been in prison for 45 years for what appeared to be a wrongful conviction. He finally did get out, but it was really amazing. He had lost most of his adult life to a conviction that was really shoddy, and there was very little. One of the things that I think people maybe do or don't realize is there's sections of the map of the United States where if an attorney general or district attorney is going to push for a case, they're going to have a conviction rate that's like well over 95%. Like the attitude is we trust the police, we trust law enforcement. If they're going through with this case, then it's probably right. And juries are just inclined to convict. There are parts of the country where it's the opposite.
Mhm.
You know, Fatima Silva, who is our attorney for reasonable doubt from the last 4 seasons, she works out of Oakland, and it's really hard to get a conviction there because juries there are just inclined not to believe anything that the authorities say.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and that makes sense, right? Regional.
Yeah, you just would like to think that that kind of thing wouldn't matter. That ultimately, right, juries are, you know, we would hope, maybe it's idealistic, that juries are weighing the evidence and seeing if the prosecution is proving their case. But we know that that's not necessarily the case. There are a lot of other factors that go into it.
Yeah. Court of public opinion weighs in pretty heavily in a lot of cases, which sucks.
And just maybe how people feel about law enforcement in different parts of the country, and how, you know, and to get them to, I mean, look, the most famous case like that was O.J. Simpson. And that was one of the first stories I covered when I was working in the LA News. And I was a young guy and I was just starting out, but I was working at KCBS. And if you just look at the evidence of that case, it's the least mysterious case you'll ever see. There's a mixture of Ronald Goldman and Nicole Simpson and O.J. Simpson's blood on the gate of her condo, and then in his Bronco, and then literally leading up the steps to his bedroom. It's not a very interesting case on that level.
Right.
But because his defense team made the trial about the LAPD, the jury really got kind of mixed up, right? Instead of dealing with this particular case, they were suddenly being presented with the idea that this was a way to somehow right the wrongs of the LAPD historically, you know, that the LAPD had historically committed against the Black community. A strange case to do it with. A very wealthy celebrity who lived on the west side of LA.
Yeah. And I remember they made it about that Furman, right? About that he was not doing his job, or like he was the main focus of what was wrong with it.
Well,
if I remember, I was pretty young. I was a teenager, but
okay. Yeah, they had a show off. They had
when I wasn't around yet. All I've seen is coverage of it.
well, what they tried to do with Furman is they kind of set him up. There was F. Lee Bailey, who was this legendary attorney who was part of the Dream Team, said to him, "Have you used the N-word in the last 5 years?" And he said no. And then they found a woman who was working on a book, and she was interviewing cops to really find out, like, what's the real story about life in the streets in LA. And she tape recorded it. And of course, he had used the N-word all over it. And so, you know, this is coming on the heels 2 years after the LA riots. So this was a really charged environment. And again, none of that really directly had to do with the evidence of, did O.J. Simpson kill his wife and this innocent person? All these other things were being brought into the equation. But unfortunately, I guess the point is, I think that happens in trials a lot.
yeah, they muddy the waters, if you will.
Yeah, but I think people bring things in, right? The question is, I've been on a murder one jury. The question is simply, did the prosecution prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt? That's your entire job. You're not supposed to solve the case. You're not there to right historical wrongs. You're there to simply answer that one question.
Mhm.
And I would say in the case of O.J. Simpson, just to use as an example, because it's well known, the answer is a resounding yes. But because so many other things were brought into the equation that didn't belong there, it was muddying the waters. You know, was the LAPD historically racist? Did the LAPD harass Black residents in the past? And those questions were probably yes, but it really had nothing to do with this case.
Okay. Well,
That's
yeah,
fair.
it's fair. Very
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. After more than 30 years in television and journalism, what still shocks you?
Just how shoddy the journalism is. I think that I think when I started, there was an old school that I was being taught. Like I started in the early 90s. I know, Daphne, you weren't around yet, but But when I started, the old school journalists, that first wave were like starting to leave the business. And so I was lucky enough to be coached and mentored a little bit by some of them. And they had ethics. They had journalism had to be balanced. Some of them didn't even register to vote because they didn't want anyone to think that they had any sort of a bias. They felt really strongly that you had to challenge authority, that you had to be a check on power. And you get both sides of every story, and you go after people in power no matter who they are, what party they belong to. And I think all of those things have sort of been lost. And journalists these days, I think, are more outcome based. They sort of know, depending on the network, what they want their audience to think, and they sort of are working backwards. So they start with the conclusion. My book that's coming out next week, Crimes of Omission, I go through a lot of what basically are true crime cases. I do the anti-police movement cases from Trayvon Martin to George Floyd, all of those hot and button cases, and really get into it and investigate it and tell all sides of those stories. And they're complicated. They're not the way they were presented in the media.
No, not at all. I read, I don't watch the news for that reason, because I feel like the media just spoon feeds you what they want you to hear. And like you said, it's based on the network and their bias. CNN does this and Fox does this. And like, what is the real deal? It's hard to know. So I just don't watch the news. I read stuff and I'll listen to like NPR, the BBC, stuff that I really want to know about, but I don't want to hear this person's view of what happened when it's not the truth.
Even though I would challenge you and just say NPR and BBC are like highly biased news sources too.
In their own way. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, they don't lie to you. They just don't report on things that are not convenient for them.
Yeah.
So they'll
fair.
tell you elements of a story that are important to them, that lead to the conclusion that they wish you to get to. They'll completely ignore stories that don't fit that agenda. And that's why, I hate to say this, as I've been sort of touring and talking to a lot of people about this book. In this particular environment, the only answer is, I hate to offer it, is homework, which is you got to watch a lot of sources, because it's almost like each news organization is like one piece of this jigsaw puzzle. And if you want to put all of it together, you got to watch a lot of it. They're only going to hand you one piece at a time.
Yeah.
And so, you got to give yourself, online, it's a little bit easier when you're reading, but read a lot of different sources, Wall Street Journal, and I mean, there's just a lot of sources, and when you read them all, a picture starts to emerge that's a little bit clearer.
Well, that makes sense.
Well, that's like what we do in our research, right?
Yeah,
is we read, 100 different sources and paint the picture from those 100 different sources, because some will say, said guy was wearing white shoes, and then 10 other articles will say, well, he was actually wearing gray shoes. So it's like, okay, one source said this, so that's probably not reliable when 10 others are reporting gray.
Yeah, 100%. Right. Yeah,
so we paint pictures frequently by reading many sources.
Yeah.
So I guess we just need to ingest our news like that too.
Yeah, I guess.
Not just our research.
Yeah, this is scary. I just don't want to know about half the things that are going on either, to be honest. But ignorance is bliss, I guess, sometimes.
Yeah, no, hey, I'm sure I would be a happier person if I wasn't constantly watching the news and reading different news sources. So.
Yeah, definitely.
You probably have the right idea.
Maybe. Ignorance is absolutely bliss.
Yeah.
In that case. So segueing into the book, what was the tipping point that made you decide that it was time, that now was like the place for Crimes of Omission to come in? That, it was now, not 10 years ago.
Right. Well, my answer is 6 years ago. I think that watching cities burn in 2020, after the George Floyd case, and realizing that even though that case clearly you see on videotape what I think the jury got right was a murder caught on tape, but I think that the whole country had gotten to a boiling point and had been so inflamed by the coverage that started with Trayvon Martin that I just had a suspicion that there was more to the story, that if you contextualized it, if you really looked at the whole picture and not just this little narrow piece that the media was feeding people for 8 straight years, would people have felt the same way? Would they have taken to the streets and set American cities on fire. And I tell the whole stories of these cases and wrote it sort of in a true crime format. And I think that for the people who read it, I think they're going to come to a very different conclusion. I mean, I've shown it to some people who even covered these cases, and they were saying, wow, there were things in there that I just didn't even know. I think that in some of the cases, the media really distorted it and got it wrong. And some of these officers who had their lives ruined, it was unjust on their part. They acted in accordance with police guidelines. But overall, this idea that people had that just literally thousands of people of color were being hunted on the streets of America was just not true and not backed up by any of the data.
No,
not at all.
no, not at all. Yeah. You argue in the book that the biggest distortions in the media often come from what's left out instead of the outright lies. So what inspired that perspective?
Well, I think it's like, I think crimes of omission. Look, when you work in a newsroom in a big city, there's usually a lawyer there. And even though news organizations will get themselves in trouble, like Fox did with Dominion, that cost them almost $1 billion. Like, that's not a mistake they want to make too often. And whoever okayed that was in a lot of trouble. So generally, you're going to find that news organizations will tell you the truth. But will they tell you the whole truth? Will they give you the entire picture? So in the case of, let's just take Michael Brown, which really started this movement in 2014. So there were pieces that they told that probably your listeners know, right? That Michael Brown was a teenager who got into some form of a confrontation with this police officer in Ferguson, Darren Wilson, and then Michael Brown ended up getting shot. Now, crimes of omission. Some of the witnesses, but there were just a few out of dozens of witnesses, said that Michael Brown appeared to be running away from the officer. The overwhelming amount of the witnesses said the opposite. It was the witnesses who were saying the most incendiary thing who were getting most of the airtime, who were getting most of the coverage. Now, it turned out once they did the autopsy report, he was shot in the front. So that backed up the officer's version of events. There were things that they left out. For example, Michael Brown, unfortunately, seemed to be suffering from a lot of like delusions in the weeks leading up to his death. He thought he was God and that he was talking to God. And he had called his father, who had recently remarried, and said, I had a vision. Your wife is going to die, your new wife. And the dad hung up on him. And on his way to that bodega, where, if you remember that surveillance footage, when he's trying to steal the cigarette rolling paper and gets into a confrontation with the owner, he's walking along a busy street with a friend of his. He just darts out in the middle of the street, and cars are like jamming on their brakes and trying to get out of the way of him. And his friend's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I've got God on my side. Like nothing can get me." And on the way back, after getting into this confrontation where they had to know that this convenience store owner was going to call the cops, Michael Brown's walking in the middle of the street again, making himself very conspicuous. And he's a big guy. He was easy to spot. And when Darren Wilson saw him and pulled up to him, and now this is from Eric Holder's report, the Attorney General for Barack Obama, all the evidence points to the fact that Michael Brown did punch him twice and try to reach for his gun. And these are things that people didn't know. What they took out of it was hands up, don't shoot, which is an apocryphal story. It never happened. And so it's not that the media lied. I think everything they said was factually true, but it was taken out of context and all inconvenient facts, all facts that pointed to the idea that this might have been a justified shooting, that this might have just been a tragic story of a troubled teen who committed suicide by cop, by reaching in, punching him, and trying to reach for his gun, became a story of some sort of a civil rights struggle. And I don't think that's what it was.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it.
No, it sounds like self-defense.
Yeah.
Well, and that is what Eric Holder concluded. Now, if you go around and ask just people randomly, was the cop justified in shooting Michael Brown? Did he say hands up, don't shoot? Was he shot in the back? I bet you that 75% of people would repeat these wrong stories from back then.
Mm-hmm.
I think very, very few people realize that, wow, Barack Obama's own attorney general, who was considered a progressive attorney general, did put out a report and concluded that the officer was justified in shooting Michael Brown.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Sorry. I just was thinking, because I don't know. Daff, go ahead. Sorry.
No, finish your thought.
Well, I was just thinking,
what was your thinking?
Well, the police get villainized so much because that's really a bigger story than the police who are doing their job, caring about the people, caring about the citizens that are actually in it for the good, because they're putting their lives on the line. The good ones are putting their lives on the line every day for pocket change because they care about society. And then there's those cops out there that, how they abuse the system and they are racially motivated and they do the corrupt ones, and obviously in the media, that's the story that nobody's ever like, oh, well, so-and-so helped Mrs. Brown with her groceries. It's like, oh, this cop beat up this kid, because he's Black. That's the only stuff you ever hear. So it kind of, I feel like it perpetuates the media to continually make villains in order to make stories bigger,
I mean, I think that the issue is that, look, there's no world where there's going to be ratings for news stories about police doing nice civic duties for the elderly in their community. It's just, right, they're not going to do that, and nobody's going to watch it. But I think that when you have a case like this that's getting a lot of attention and a lot of people are descending on the city of Ferguson, the ethical thing for the journalist to do is to present all the facts with no agenda and let people decide what they want to make of all those facts. That's not what was happening here, because a lot of the facts that I had just laid out that were the crimes of omission weren't being mentioned or talked about at all. They were just sort of, inconvenient truths that were not to be discussed. They were holding their audience by the hand and leading them to a conclusion. Mm-hmm. This was a racist cop who killed an unarmed teen, and this is not an isolated case. Mm-hmm. And this drumbeat was continuously going on for 8 straight years till we get to the summer of 2020, where 29 people died in that rioting. So it had consequences.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
Yeah. There was an escalation.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So did you have any opinions that changed or that you held before writing this book that have shifted? Like, since, we heard, it took me reading your chapter about Trayvon Martin to understand, like, oh, I pictured Trayvon Martin as this little boy with a lollipop in his hand, right?
Yeah.
I didn't picture him as a teenager who was walking, who was just walking home. Like, they portrayed it in a totally different light when I heard about it.
Yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know, when you close your eyes and you think of Trayvon Martin from watching the coverage, those were pictures that you would see in on the news that were taken when he was like 13. And by the time of his confrontation with George Zimmerman, if I remember right, he was 17. And he was actually taller than Zimmerman, and he was a big kid. And the news was taking photos that the family's attorney, Benjamin Crump, had given them, which showed a sweet 13-year-old boy. Now, the reason that he was doing this was to implant in people's minds and future jurors' minds that George Zimmerman, a grown man who is a big guy, is getting into a confrontation with a child. And that wasn't true. But I call it a crime of omission because, it was Trayvon Martin, right? So it's shifting context, shifting focus, withholding information. These are the ways that the media will distort the news. Rarely an outright lie, right? They're not going to show a picture of somebody else. Mm-hmm. But it was deceptive and it was distorting.
Yeah. That one part where you wrote that was one of the news channels that they just edited the 911 call. And basically he was like, oh, there's this kid, or like, there's this guy and he looks suspicious. And then it says, and he's Black or whatever. They cut out the part where the 911 operator is like, is he Black? Is he white? Is he, describe him? And
yeah, I believe that was I can't remember. It was one of the morning shows. I think it was ABC.
Yeah, I
And the
think the
producer
Day
did
Show.
and the producer did get fired. But that was an example of this, the network in that case, the quiet part was said out loud, which is we are going to stack the decks in this case to sort of reach a predetermined conclusion. I mean, I remember watching, I went to Vanderbilt, they record all of this. They record every newscast, like since the late 60s. And I'm watching like Anderson Cooper's coverage with the attorney. And the questions were just such softballs. There was no skepticism. They weren't even open to the possibility, because we didn't know at that time. They weren't even open to the possibility that maybe George Zimmerman was justified. Maybe Trayvon Martin was the aggressor. We didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And but it was just sort of this, Anderson Cooper saying things like, well, I wear a hoodie around the neighborhood, but I'm not getting attacked. And it was like, this isn't news coverage, right? You're sort of throwing softballs to a family attorney who is going to look to get damages. But the role of a traditional newscaster would be to be polite, but ask some difficult questions,
Mm-hmm.
right? Witnesses say that it looked perhaps like Trayvon was on top of George Zimmerman, attacking him. What's your response? And, and maybe not running the picture of him when he was 13 years old in the coverage, because that is pretty incendiary,
Mm-hmm.
and stacking the deck. So, yeah, I to circle way back, because Daphne, I think you asked me what was the thing that surprised me the most. I spoke to like dozens of people who are really high profile in journalists and news managers and even CEOs. Some of them I had worked with before and knew, and some of them I hadn't. But I think the biggest thing that really surprised me is how quick journalists in these organizations, because of this cultural moment, were ready to sort of look the other way as they saw the standards of the profession get trampled. And I understand it because I've been in newsrooms forever, and the culture can be strong and you can get marginalized really quick if you're like one of the people who doesn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was a runaway train, and I think it just kept feeding on itself and feeding on itself. And, I do get the sense, because you notice, by the way, they were covering these stories round the clock, cherry picking cases where it was a white cop and a black suspect, round the clock coverage. You notice that they're almost all not covering them anymore. And the funny thing about it is, not funny, the tragic and bitterly ironic part of all this is that police shootings have actually gone up since all this happened, but the media just moved on. And so it went from inciting the public, cherry picking cases, not contextualizing what was happening, to just pretending the story doesn't exist anymore. Neither one is right. And the media could never find its equilibrium on this story.
Mm.
I also think it was interesting, though, that you just said that they were covering these stories of white cop, black person. With George Zimmerman, he was mixed. He wasn't white. And
Right.
they said, or you said in the book, that he had an outwardly that he looked black, but that he identified with his Hispanic heritage.
Yeah, his mom was half Afro-Peruvian, so he could have, but whenever he filled out forms or voting registration, he would say Latino.
Yeah. So
But
that's
that also was
interesting.
the case, Philando Castile out of Minnesota, which was another case that I do a chapter on. The cop in that one was Latino as well. So yeah, there was things were quickly overlooked if it fit the story or the narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
It's the narrative. So we're not going to talk about race. Well, and that's another thing you argued, that they were trying to say in the case that it wasn't about race when they took it to court. And everyone's like, well, it was about race. What do you mean?
Right.
Like, we're going to omit this because it's fitting of the story now,
Yeah.
because it doesn't.
And you would think that they
Right.
would correct, right? Like in a lot of these chapters and a lot of the cases. And again, I hope, for your listeners, I mean, I hope they get the sense that it really does read like a true crime story, because that's my background. But in a lot of these cases, you would have public outrage. You would have crimes of omission where they're only telling part of the story. There was a lot of hand wringing, and then finally charges would be pressed against one of the officers. And either it would go to court, like in George Zimmerman's case or like in Freddie Gray's case, and juries were acquitting, mixed race juries were acquitting these officers. Or I guess in George Zimmerman's case, you would say, a law enforcement figure, I guess, or a volunteer.
Mhm.
Or, and this goes all the way up until Derek Chauvin, or grand juries weren't even willing to indict. And the immediate conclusion was, well, that just has to prove that the system is broken and racist. But no one took a moment to think, well, maybe these cases, maybe we're not getting the story right. Maybe when a jury looks at all the evidence without prejudice, they're just not finding that the prosecution proved their case.
Right.
Yeah.
Because Jillian sent us 2 chapters, and man, I'm like, I have to read this whole book. This is really good. Like, there's so much stuff.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, there's just so much stuff that I didn't know, And when Daphne and I were talking about, I'm like, well, she was young, but I'm like, this was not at all portrayed this way, And it was very, I don't know, it's scary. And I think, honestly, that's probably about the time that I quit watching the news. Because I'm just like, I just can't with this,
I mean, I'm sure you found, I know just doing a little background on you guys, right? You've had some cases where things are tried through the media, and that doesn't mean that the media is getting it right.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Not even a little.
Not remotely close.
No.
Like I'm so blanking on there. I always tell my mom, I'm like, I feel like the second after we do it, I just brain dump everything, because it's hard to hold on to these stories, right?
Oh my God.
It hurts your soul to latch on and think about. And I always tell my mom, I'm like, I can't even watch true crime shows now. Like, I have such a hard time being like, okay, I have to research for the podcast, and now I'm watching true crime. It's like, I can't always forever live in this space. So anyway, I dump some things out of my brain.
I totally get it. I mean, sometimes people ask me about a specific Dead Files episode, and we did over 200 of them. And I'm like, so many, I mean, some of them stand out, I'll never forget, but some of them is just like brain dump. Like, you cannot keep 200 plus episodes in your brain.
Yeah.
No, you can't.
It takes up too much space.
It does.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But that's what I was going to say about that Johnny kid, the one that got put to death. Yeah, he got put to death because of this nun that was murdered. And then years later, it came out that it was this other person that did it, and that he was actually a granny killer, that he was going around just killing all these old women. And so it wasn't this particular Johnny kid, but the media, he had special needs. So the media took I think he had autism, was what they said. I believe that was his. Anyway, they took his being easily coerced into just totally flipping it into, oh, it was this kid, and now we're going to convict him. Everyone knows that it was this Johnny kid that murdered this nun. And so that's it. We're done with it, instead of ever questioning. This kid has special needs. We're coercing him into a confession that he never made. He'll tell you anything you want to hear.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not.
That's something I learned during Reasonable Doubt. Here are 2 things I learned just that have nothing to do with journalism, but just the justice system. One, I never really believed when they said someone was coerced into a confession. That always sounded like BS to me. And I do see, from covering these cases, that can happen. There is a personality type,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, there's a personality type, I would think it's the majority, where you're not going to get someone to admit they did something they didn't, unless you're like, torturing them physically. But we saw some cases where someone really seemed to think like, I don't know, maybe if I just tell them what they want to hear, they'll leave me alone, which doesn't seem logical to me, but I see that it can happen. But the bigger thing I figured out was that witness testimony, when it's someone you don't know, is really unreliable. So it's one thing, if you see a friend or a loved one doing something, that's probably pretty good witness testimony. You know them. But if it's a stranger that you later have to identify out of a lineup, or, you don't know them, you didn't get that great a look at them, like, that can be super unreliable.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of false convictions because of that.
Yeah. I think that's really true. Right. Yeah.
A lot of false convictions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
Reliable
witness
people.
testimony is notoriously, because people get a picture in their brain too. And then it it fits the closest one, you know what I mean? And not the one that actually did it or didn't do it. So
It's interesting when you have like cases like, again, this is before your time, Daphne, but there was a story out of Los Angeles, the McMartin preschool case. And basically all these nursery school students, I guess they ended up charging the people who ran this nursery school with sexual assault. And basically it turned out that these were like forced memories. And maybe some parents who had some questions were just kind of implanting these memories, and it became this kind of mania. But anyway, as best as I understand it, I haven't studied it that closely. But those people were acquitted, and it was basically agreed after the fact that nothing had really happened.
Yeah, they accused him of sexual assault and like devil worship and stuff. Like it got super heavy. It was like, really? And they're putting these memories into these kids' heads. Nothing really happened. So really scary. Yeah. And like, so their lives were ruined. And like almost the same with George Zimmerman. Not that it was a false memory or anything, but like he obviously, not that Trayvon Martin deserved to die, but it clearly was self-defense just based on the autopsy. You know?
Well, yeah, there was in the trial, which I write about, there were a couple things that really kind of destroyed the prosecution's case. And the first one is you had a neighbor who had really no axe to grind, and identifying by the color of the shirts indicated that Trayvon Martin was on top of Zimmerman and slamming his head against the pavement, which obviously then is self-defense if Zimmerman pulls out the weapon. And then you had that forensic expert who said that basically the injuries and the gunshot entrance and everything was consistent with Zimmerman's story. So, it's important for people to remember the jury is not saying, they're not finding guilt or innocence. They're simply asked to one side of the equation. You can think someone's probably guilty, but if the prosecution didn't prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, you've got to say not guilty. That's why I always cringe when I see journalists saying, so and such a jury found someone innocent. That's not what they do.
Right.
And it's not the question that they're supposed to, right? I think people misunderstood that, like with Casey Martin. It's the difference. It's a big difference when you really think about it.
It's a huge difference. They just didn't prove their case. Doesn't mean they didn't do it.
Exactly. And because a jury finds in favor of a defendant, it's because our system really forces prosecutors and the government to clear a really high bar before you're going to put somebody in prison, which, back to reasonable doubt, was one of the things that really shocked me, because in some cases, they didn't even come close to clearing a high hurdle. I mean, one witness and they were putting somebody away.
Frightening.
It's very frightening.
Yeah.
But those were, I'm guessing, in the cases, right, where you got the conviction overturned.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we got it overturned, but I think having the attention on it created the momentum to get a reversal. And in some cases, a couple of the defendants were, or the convicted felons were also exonerated. So, yeah, it was. Here's another thing I think I figured out. Usually in the cases where it's like a domestic love triangle, things like that, I would say the percentage of wrongful convictions in those kinds of cases are pretty low. Generally, the wrongful convictions are like drug cases or a gang shooting or, street crimes where, especially in the 90s during the crack epidemic, cops just wanted to close the books on cases and show that they were tough on crime, and they were just speeding through it. And I think this is more conjecture than a fact, but I think probably to a lot of cops, maybe we got the wrong gangbanger in there, but we're just avoiding a future crime by doing that. It didn't seem like anyone was losing too much sleep over it.
Right. Yeah.
So,
maybe not guilty, but preventatively guilty, or preventative.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that was not a good time for law enforcement and necessarily in the ethics of law enforcement. I mean, we tilt the advantage to the side of the defendant for a good reason, and it's to force force law enforcement to really prove their case before a citizen is going to lose their life or have to spend the rest of their life behind bars. And when they're not doing that and they're just kind of like slamming things through the process, then obviously there's an issue with the way the system is working. Even though I will say, overall, even the Innocence Project will say that 5% of convicted murderers are wrongfully convicted. So even using their numbers and their advocates for the convicted, they're still saying 19 out of 20 times the system gets it right, which isn't high enough. But it's still, just so people have perspective, it generally does work well. But when it doesn't work well, that's a little solace to the convict and to the families.
Yeah, absolutely.
So are you worried about backlash at all with these shows and with the book Crimes of Omission coming out, and that, like, okay, we keep talking about Trayvon Martin, right? That like his family would say, why are you talking about this? Like, he very clearly was killed by this guy. So why does it matter that we put a picture of him as a 2-year-old on the screen versus, a picture of him as a 17-year-old?
I mean, I think that if you're doing journalism right, you're going to ruffle some feathers. But there was some backlash when we did Reasonable Doubt. And I remember I don't spend a lot of time engaging with X and reading all the comments, but like some people would say comments like, me as the showrunner and the creator of the show, like I'm just like a white guilt guy. And I mean, the truth of the matter is I don't really have a ton of empathy for convicted murderers. I mean, I'm fine with them spending the rest of their life in prison.
Zero.
But yeah. But if the wrong person's in there and the real killer is walking the streets free, I don't know how that's not something that people would want exposed.
Right.
Somebody got away with it. Now you've got two tragedies. Somebody died. The person who killed them got away with it. And somebody else who's not guilty of it is spending time behind bars. Why wouldn't you want to rectify that wrong?
Right.
Absolutely. I just think about it from the perspective, though, of a family that, it doesn't matter who got it doesn't matter who got convicted of this, as long as justice is served in one way or another. Most families feel okay, right? Because somebody's behind bars for the crime, whether that person did it or not.
Yeah, but I think that most families, if they really started to believe that there was a wrongful conviction, I don't think they would feel very good about it. If you really know that you're mourning someone and you thought you had justice, and now you're realizing that the person that the system told you did it and is paying the price for it was innocent, I can't imagine that you feel good about it. We talked a lot of times on a lot of the episodes, if you watch them, they're streaming on Max, we would talk to, and we always reached out to the victims' families. And there was a little bit of pressure back in that time when we did the show, because it was really at the height of the anti-police movement. It was like 2015 to 2022. And there was a little bit of pressure to like lean on the side of like finding ways to get behind these defendants, these convicts. And I just refused to do that. To me, it wasn't worth it to re-victimize people who are mourning the loss of someone who had been murdered. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to do it fair. I wanted to give them a chance to speak, and a lot of times they did. And when we thought that someone was rightfully convicted, we let them know. We didn't pull any punches. But in the cases where justice hadn't been served, I think people deserve to know that, and deserve to really have a chance maybe for justice. If someone is exonerated, hopefully the case is reopened.
Mm-hmm. I did Tommy Lynn Sells, and this guy did a lot of time for killing. He spent, I don't know, I can't even remember, because again, brain dump, but decades in prison for killing this woman, because the daughter, who was a teenager, young teenager at the time, said that he was the one that did it. And there was like a little bit of evidence pointing to him, because he had had kind of a relationship with the mom, and he was convicted. And then later she saw Tommy Lynn Sells on something as she was an adult, and she was like, oh crap, like that's the guy. It's not this guy. So she helped get him out, and she called his daughter and was like crying, was like, I'm so sorry. This is I did this. Like, I have to help your dad get out. And he did get exonerated. I think it was like 76 or something when he got out. Like, and that
It was most of his life that he was in.
Yeah. Sucks.
Yeah, he did. But I mean, there was evidence when you did that like he had a previous criminal history. So it wasn't like far fetched that, that he could have done anything. Not that it should have been placed on him, but it also wasn't far fetched, because he had this criminal history, a violent criminal history also.
Yeah. Just not quite that violent.
Right. Not murder violent, but like pushing someone out of a car and taking it. Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how much like side things get into the heads of juries and get introduced into trials, because we did so many of these, and we would really like look through police reports and like just what are the facts? Like, what do we know to be true? And ultimately, just for me personally, someone's history maybe had a little bit of play into it, but not a lot. I don't know. If you are in a love triangle, maybe that's where you are going to commit your first murder. Just because you haven't done it before doesn't mean you're not capable of it. And right, and just yeah, I mean, everyone's got to get their first job. And if you've got a long history, a criminal history, it doesn't mean And that was the trap that a lot of police fell into with gang cases in the 90s and drug cases. So a lot of these wrongful convictions involved someone who had a very long criminal history, but it didn't mean they committed that particular murder. So, yeah, it's interesting to me how much evidence that to me personally feels a little bit off to the side of what really happened gets introduced into these cases. Like ultimately, right, the prosecution's just got to lay out. It can be a circumstantial case, but lay out these facts as you know them that stand, and then a jury's got to decide if the pieces fit.
Absolutely. All right, next. Sorry.
Yeah.
We're like,
you guys have a question list.
Yeah, and you're answering a lot of them before we even get there. So great.
I have that
We
habit.
love that.
No, it's totally fine.
No, that's great. That's great. But now I want to move on.
You should throw in a random one in there that just has nothing to do with anything.
What's your shoe size? No. Sorry.
Are
That's
you
my
gonna
brain.
are you going to gift me? I like Adidas. Yeah.
Oh, Adidas.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I want to ask some Dead Files questions.
Let's do it.
Where won't you go back to? What was like the creepiest place you guys ever visited? And it's like, nope, I will not step foot back in this house or this building, this location ever again. It's just not happening.
So I didn't get creeped out by too many locations. Like, when you're on set, you're really busy. Like it's a show for you, right? Not for Amy, but for us, it's like I've got a crew to watch and I've got to get coverage. And so you're not really in that mode. But there was one place that we shot in Virginia. I can't remember the name of the town, but I can visualize it. And it was a former slave plantation. And Amy had just done the walk, and it was really creepy. And I remember that the crew was out in a different part of the building, and I was down in the like basement area where slaves had been held. And suddenly it just got in my head, and it was really dark and it was kind of cold. And I'm like, I've got to get out of here. Like, I just had to go up and find the crew. That was really creepy.
That's awesome.
I would rather not go back to Kansas, but that has nothing to do with the paranormal. It's just my Kansas.
What happened in Kansas?
It just was Kansas. I don't know. I didn't get it.
No, I understand that completely. I started school in Kansas and I stayed for 24 hours and I was like, I'm going home. Like, true story. Yeah. Unpacked me into my dorm and I was like, actually, I can't stay in Kansas.
Were you in Lawrence?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was in Lawrence.
Which is actually the one pretty place in Kansas, but
yeah, we were in Wichita like a few different times. Wichita is rough.
Oh. Okay,
Yeah.
noted.
Yeah.
Don't go to Wichita. No, I actually really liked Lawrence because then I ended up going back a couple of times. I dated a guy for the whole next summer that I'd met there. And it was cool there, like just not living there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't live there.
So before doing the show, The Dead Files, were you a believer of paranormal activity or not?
No, not really. I remember when I mean, it's hard because you are right. I mean, you're looking at it as like almost like with a documentarian's eye, like, okay, the people that we would cast who were on the show 100% believed it was ruining their lives. No question. Like they were very, you've seen the show. They were really emotional and it was really important to them. Amy had her abilities. There was nothing about her that ever indicated that she wasn't 100% all in. And so for me, it was like, we're here to document these stories. And Steve, who is the former NYPD cop, he's the skeptic.
He cracks me up.
Yeah, he was funny. And and he's the skeptic, the resident skeptic, and he's the one who would ask questions about people's experiences as if he was interviewing. I would just always tell him, like, interview them as if you were still working the beat and someone told you that they were the victims of an armed robbery. What kind of questions would you ask? Ask them this, even though, whatever it was. So I don't think, like, I remember when I first met about taking over the show, because someone did the first 8 episodes and they put Amy on speakerphone and she said, "Are you a believer?" And I said, "I'm a skeptic." And she was like, good. I think it annoyed her if people were like too fawning. She's like, "I'm not sure myself." And so that was good because it allowed room to just kind of like go through it with an open mind.
And so at the end, skeptic or believer, or still kind of?
There were certain cases out of the 200 plus, because she would do sketches, as you know from watching the show.
Mm-hmm.
There were a couple that were like so dead on that it really was like a little bit. Those were moments where you had to kind of like check yourself and really think about that. Like, how could that happen?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, look, I think obviously Amy is tapping into something when she does these walks and when she talks to people, talks to the dead.
Mm-hmm.
Do I believe? That's a really loaded question.
Sorry.
I guess I would I guess I would just say I believe that whatever she did and however she did it was pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that it convinces me that the dead walk among us.
Okay, fair enough.
Do you believe in it? What do you think?
I don't know. I think sometimes and sometimes not. I don't know. I don't know how to say it, because I think sometimes people are full of shit, and I think that people just
perpetuate stories.
Well, and I literally just put out an episode about the Enfield poltergeist, which is what The Conjuring 2 was based on. And like, is it real? Is it not real? Were a bunch of people there investigating this thing, and then they all just started to believe that they were seeing stuff that they weren't really seeing. Like, I don't know, But then I did have this really weird experience that my dad passed away quite a few years before one of my other friends passed away. And I was really sad the day that she passed away. And I went into our garage and my dad smoked a pipe and I could smell his pipe tobacco. And I was like, oh, that's so weird. And then like a long time later, I said to my husband, I said, the day that Pat died, I said, and I went in the garage, and he finished my sentence. He said, and you smelled your dad's pipe tobacco. And I was like, oh, yes.
We should have had you on the show.
Yeah. But I mean, other than that, it's like, it's hard to know if people are just wanting it and so they see it, or I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to know. Like, if you convince yourself that there's a poltergeist in your home, every time something falls off a bookshelf, every time you hear like a door slam shut, every time something happens, that if you don't have that belief, you just are like, okay, it's things move around the house. The wind came through. All of a sudden, this reinforces your belief, and then it compounds, right? So I think that's part of it. Even though I had kind of a similar experience when my dad died, which was at the very beginning of us filming the show. It was in 2012. And I went to Florida where my mom was at the house. And that night, um, and this had been an experience that I had heard people on the Dead Files say, that night, not just the smoke detector in my room, but like in two other rooms went off at the same time, which is a really weird coincidence, right? That the batteries would all die. And that's supposedly a common paranormal experience when someone's passing away and leaving this plane. Make of it what you will, but it was weird.
I love that.
Yeah.
I do. I love that. I think that that's special.
Yeah. Well,
yes.
And who knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe all the batteries were put in at the same time and they all went out at the same time, or
maybe, right?
Not.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not willing to declare it. Look, I think that the paranormal is like an alternate religion in some ways, right? The big question that we all have is what happens when we die.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if people say they're not afraid of death. I don't believe them. I think everybody thinks about it. And I think I think it's the number one question that we'll never get the answers to. And so religion provides one answer, and some people just insist they know and nothing happens. And maybe that's true. But I think that the paranormal offers another answer. And I think that's why it has such a strong pull on people.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think true crime has such a pull on people?
Maybe it comes back to the fear of death, right? One of the weird things about about true crime is like on Investigation Discovery, I think they were telling us it's 60% female, which I didn't think when I'd sold the show to them in the beginning. Like, I didn't realize that it was so female centric. But I've read, obviously, I'm sure some of the same things you have, that women with their greatest fear of being kind of, maybe overpowered by men or, predators, or this is a way to sort of live out your nightmare. But usually in these kind of shows, justice prevails in the end. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why Reasonable Doubt was really probably the only show that ID did like this, where we're questioning whether justice was done in the end. Mm-hmm. If you watch any other ones, Sisters Who Kill, I Slept with the Killer, and, all these ways they thin slice murders. In the end, the bad guy gets his and everybody's safe. Mm-hmm. But this was a show that questioned, like, did the bad guy really get it?
Yeah, I'm going to watch it. I don't watch that much TV. So, I mean, I'd heard of it, but I watched like a little bit of it after we read your bio, and I was like, I just have to check this out. And I'm like, I need to watch this. This will be.
It's a good show. You'll like it.
This will be something that I will watch, because I did watch the Dead Files, but kind of like, I don't know. I like to be scared, and so I think that's why I watched it. That, and Daphne, when she was little, that's why we're here. So
I was scarred for life, and this
she didn't have a choice.
Yeah, this wasn't a choice.
Yeah.
Do you guys like horror movies?
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
I just watched
being forced onto me.
I just went to go see Obsession, and
I sent her the trailer for that. She didn't ever respond to my text. I was like, I guess I'm gonna go by myself.
I mean, it was made for under $1 million. It's pretty good.
Oh, cool. We'll go see it.
That's the one that they think is going to take over box offices, right? That it's going to be like just crazy by the time it's
they made
done.
it. I mean, already, yeah. I mean, they made it for under $1 million, and I think it's on pace to cross 100 million. So
yeah,
and it's good. I mean, it's not the most amazing. It's not The Exorcist, but it's good. It's really good.
Good to
see.
know.
That's what I refuse to watch. I refuse to watch people bending and twisting their bodies and contorting and doing just unpleasant looking shit.
Right.
Did you see Rosemary's Baby?
No.
That's another classic. Okay. These are classic horror movies from back in the day.
Yeah.
Before my time, but they're worth seeing.
Yeah.
I just can't with the body things. That freaks me out.
And then I need to know about Dennis Miller, because I think he's awesome. So
it's great. I was so I sold the show because I always, after Dead Files and Reasonable Doubt, I was like, I need it. I've just been doing death for 12 years. Like, I need something fun. And I used to love infomercials. I just thought they were funny and campy, and I don't think I ever bought anything from them, but they were always on. Gail, you remember this period. You were with me, right? Where
I bought this.
Night.
thing that you could cook. You put apple juice in it and you cooked pork chops, and I bought it, and it sucked.
Set it and forget it. But I mean, there were so many, right? There was Stop the Insanity, the diet plan. Remember her? And, there were so many. And,
I remember these.
Okay.
Wait,
All right.
if you act now,
Yeah.
we'll throw in this.
100%. So
Yeah.
I got to interview and meet a lot of the stars of these infomercials, which was amazing. But anyway, so Fox teamed me up with Dennis. I'd always been a big fan, but I was a little nervous because he's so smart. It's a little bit intimidating. Nicest guy. And keep in touch with him, and he's great and really enjoyed it. And he's super collaborative and would just send me like texts sometimes out of nowhere and just say, they would just say, I just want you to know I'm really proud to be part of this project, which you don't get from anyone, trust me.
Oh, yeah.
And so, for someone who was already kind of legendary, that was nice to get. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
That's good. And it's good to know that he's an actual nice person too. Because he's brilliant. I just fangirl over him for sure. And then when I read that, I was like, oh, cool.
She's like, this is amazing.
Yeah. She's like, I don't know who Dennis Miller is. I'm like, oh, you're missing out.
No idea. What's the most disturbing case in your opinion, like ever? Like if you could work on a case, if you could show a case, like write about it, what is the most disturbing one that you're immediately doing?
I think, this isn't the goriest one. It's just the most haunting one. I always found Jeffrey McDonald out of upstate New York. Do you know that case? A book and a made-for-TV movie had been made out of it. He was a Yale graduate, a decorated military officer, and he was, I might get some of these wrong, some of these details of the case wrong, but this is like the early 70s, and he's still alive. He was up, maybe he just died. Can someone look, can I fact check?
Yeah.
As we talk. So hold on, let me just see.
We love fact
all of us. Okay. This is like being on Joe Rogan, right? You just fact check while we talk. Jeffrey McDonald. Okay. No, he is alive. I didn't mean to kill him. Okay. He's alive. He's 82. But
he's dead to all of us anyway. It's fine.
Yes. So he's on this military base and he is got 2 young daughters and his wife and no record, right? And he's like the winner. He's like a good looking guy. The family's good looking. Everything seems great. And then one night he calls the police and he's like, these like hippies just came through my house, like Manson types. Get over here quick. Well, they come over. Both of the young children are dead, like brutally murdered, like ice pick kind of murderers, like, with knives. The wife's dead. And he's got his lungs collapsed because he took a knife to the lung, and pig is scrawled out in blood on the living room. And so he's portrayed as the victim, and the father-in-law, his wife's father, just wasn't sitting right with him, and he couldn't let the case go. And this went on for a few years, kept pushing the police, keep looking into this, keep looking into this, keep looking into this. And there wasn't any big break, but there are a couple details that I remember that were really interesting. As they looked into it, the idea of like why was he spared and nobody else was, that seemed a little bit odd. But the biggest detail that I remember was that there was a Life magazine article about the Manson family. And basically it described some of the members of it, and it matched the description of what he claimed were the people who came in and did this.
And he wrote the word pig.
Right. And then there was like a little detail in the bedroom. There was a suitcase with a couple things in it, and there was no blood around it. And there was just sort of this, this haunting thought, like, was his first impulse like get in the car and just drive and try to go into hiding, and then he thought better of it and stabs himself. But he's someone who always claimed he was innocent. It was a highly circumstantial case. He to this day has claimed he's innocent. I try to do a reasonable doubt episode on him because I'm just always been fascinated with the case. But basically his prison wife was like, well, unless you can guarantee that you guys are going to say that he's not guilty, we don't want to do it. So I said, well, we're not going to guarantee that. So
no, we're not.
But that case was just haunting. I think just haunting, obviously, because it just was like so unbelievably brutal. What would make someone snap like that?
Mhm.
Kill their young children? Kill, it's possible, it's been speculated that it was a fight with his wife. He kills her, and then the children could be witnesses, so he kills them.
Ugh.
Am I freezing?
A
A little bit.
Okay. All right. Hold on. There. I'm moving again.
Yeah, you're back. I wonder if that's like what Chris Watts inspired his
Yeah. I
murder
don't know.
spree of his wife and kids on.
Yeah. I don't know. Did you get the court documents on that? Did you get a look at it at all, or did you not because you
I
weren't
think
gonna
some
do it?
members of the staff were starting to pull some of it, but because we couldn't really get very far and we didn't have the cooperation. Like, we never did an episode of Reasonable Doubt if the family wasn't on board and we didn't have an interview with the inmate.
Mhm.
All of them involved inmate interviews, some of them in person. And if we didn't have those elements, then we didn't do it. So I don't think we spend too much time or resources on it.
Okay.
Family, like victim's family or the perp's family?
The Perps family, because we did it through their eyes. So basically, someone would call us in a little bit. I was repeating myself from Dead Files just a little bit, but it was like someone would call us in and it would be like, okay, we're brother and sister, and our father has been doing time for a murder that we just know he didn't commit. And we would talk to them a little bit. We would get their leads, like, all right, give us some leads that would show that he's not guilty. And we would reinvestigate those leads, and then at the end, let them know whether we were going to back the case or not. So if someone like Jeffrey McDonald wasn't on board and his wife wasn't willing to speak for him, then we weren't going to do it.
So most of the cases that you guys did came to you then? You didn't seek them out?
The first season, like with any show like this, nobody knows about it. So you have to kind of seek them out. So we would, a lot of Google searching and wrongful conviction and, and reaching out to families. And I mean, I would get pitched by the staff and I would probably throw out like 80% of them. Because if they just don't pass the smell test right away, if you hear the convict's excuse and it's like, come on,
Right.
in broad daylight, they killed someone and 8 people saw them, and it's like, oh, they were all bought off. Yeah, we're not doing that.
Right.
And I also didn't want to do like too many DNA cases because you're just fighting science. If you say you weren't at a scene and your DNA's there, then
Yeah.
what are we really talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in that Tommy Linsell's one, that guy, they said that they had his DNA at the crime scene because in her diary, she had written that she had had a relationship with that guy, but it really wasn't his DNA. But they got him convicted based on the fact that they said it was his DNA.
And they didn't bring in a DNA expert who would testify that they did find it there?
I don't know for sure about his trial, but they got a conviction based on the fact that they said that his DNA was at the crime scene and it wasn't actually. So, but this was what Tommy Linsell's, it was the 70s. So it was really pre-good DNA.
Oh, yeah. I mean, OJ, go back to OJ, that trial was 94, 95. That was like brand new then. Barry Scheck, who was part of the Dream Team, who would go on to found the Innocence Project. That was like one of the first times we had ever heard about DNA. And I remember that they asked the jury forewoman, Brenda Moran, about it. They said, didn't the DNA evidence sway you at all? And she just said, DNA schmiene.
I remember that. Like,
yeah.
I remember.
So it was not common.
Yeah. I remember just from like the recent stuff with him and him dying and all this stuff coming back out, I do remember just seeing a snippet of that when I was a kid. I don't remember, but yeah, DNA was just like,
you got to keep reminding me you were a kid.
Well, sorry. I'm old now. That makes you feel any better.
So is there any chance for either one of these shows to have a reboot?
Oh, I like the way you're thinking. Never say never. Never say never. I mean, I would love to do Crimes of Omission as a limited series. And I think that's something, once we see how the book does, that's something that I might explore because I think that would be interesting and visual. And in order to show people, right, you could show people coverage and then sort of expand it and say, but this is what was not mentioned. And then go through all of those things.
I think that would be incredible. Because like I said, just reading those 2 chapters and the way that you wrote it, totally fact-based. And while you're reading it, you can see it. And so that to me is like a good book, and
well,
it's
thank you.
true. So appreciate it. But I guess we don't want to keep keeping you because you probably have stuff to do.
This has been a blast. Can I plug? No, it has been. I've enjoyed talking to you guys. Can I plug the book?
Yes,
yeah, duh.
That's why you're here.
Absolutely.
Shameless plugging.
Yeah, where can we get it? Where can we buy it? When
It's
does it
called
come out?
Crimes of Omission by Rob Rosen, and online everywhere. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, wherever you get your books. Order now. It releases Tuesday.
Yep.
I don't know when you run this.
June
but,
2nd. We're going to drop it on June 2nd.
Yeah.
It's released today. Today is the release day.
It's coming out today, folks.
Yeah.
Yep. We just time machined it. It's
Yeah.
coming out today.
We're excited.
So yeah, I think for your audience in particular, I think they'll enjoy it. I think it does read like a true crime story, and it's like each chapter is its own little mystery.
For sure. And Daphne's trying to start a book club with our listeners. So we'll see if we can get them on board for this one.
Yeah.
Nice.
We are trying to start a book club.
All right, hold on. The book on Jeffrey MacDonald, you got to include this. This book really, I read this as a kid, and it truly, sorry, I'm doing this thing again, but I'm going to check.
I'm pulling out my pen. I'm getting ready to write this down.
Okay. This book was I just remember reading it as a kid and I couldn't put it down. It's got Fatal Vision. That was the name of it.
Okay.
I mean, it's an old book, but it's just the way it's written. It was so haunting.
I love
really
that.
I remember reading Helter Skelter too, years later, and that was really eerie and haunting.
That was written by the detective.
Not the detective, the prosecutor.
Yeah.
Yeah, Vincent Bugliosi, who's since died. But yeah, that was really like just the level of mind control is very haunting.
Very frightening.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Scariest person because he never did anything himself.
Yeah. So much. And thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, this has been a blast.
This was fun. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank
you. And good luck with the book. And if it becomes a show, we'll definitely watch.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Really nice meeting you.
You as well.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for your time.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. You see, there was nothing to be nervous about. We had fun.
And we had a great time.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
All
you. Okay, we hope everyone enjoyed that interview with Rob. He was great. So thank you again so much for Rob for coming on and his publicist, Jillian, for setting this up for us. It was wonderful. You can follow him at Rob Rosen 14 on Instagram. And again, you can get his book, Crimes of Omission, anywhere where you get books.
Comes out June 2nd.
I was going to say, do you have anything to say?
We got the first and 10th chapter.
They're great.
We were able to read, and great. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Very informative, and
yeah, we will be picking
super
up
well
his
written.
book.
Yeah, we'll definitely be getting the book.
And you can comment on our Instagram if you want to have a book club and go over this book, and we can send Rob our questions. We can ask him all of our burning questions now if we desire.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, give him a follow. Check out the book. It's going to be fabulous. The whole thing. We know the first and the 10th chapter are fabulous. So the rest of it's going to be fabulous and make you question everything you thought. So that's also brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant.
Yep. And then you can follow us on Instagram at That's Disturbing Podcast. You can send us a Gmail, that's disturbingpodcast@gmail.com. And that's all we got. Bye-bye.